So I actually find it quite remarkable to be here in Amsterdam, or in the Netherlands, in a country where the stock exchange emerged and the first bubble, and now talking about like new ways of organization and businesses. It's really exciting. And I think also for the first time in human history, we're really able to create organizations that are fully permissionless, autonomous, infinitely scalable, and also have a business model behind it. And so the title is like obviously slightly arbitrary, but on purpose I focus on design because the approach to an organization is actually very similar to actually designing something, because you're listening to people and then you're creating an infrastructure that supports what they want. And at this stage I also want to kind of thank everybody at DeepWork who has been part of the studio that I built over the last 3 years, because they were the active participants in a system that was able to build that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is based on, and it wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Before I go into a lot of details on how to do that, I actually want to highlight something quite interesting that I find about the history of work, which is that before the Middle Ages, work was seen as something that's a fundamental part of human life, so people would just do it. And through the Middle Ages, at least in Europe, Christian chauvinists decided that doing work is something that's like, that makes you a good person. So only if you do good work, you actually become an important part of society, or like a well-functioning part of society, because you would, the profits that you would receive, you would donate to church, and the church would distribute that across the poor people. So God finds that great, so you're a good person now. Then that kind of concept translated through industrialization into factories, so that except the profits were not donated to the church, but actually been handled by the factory owners as they wished. And so that led to a huge economic growth, and also to this idea that new economists picked up on, to think that it's good that people feel part of a society even though they think that doing work is a disutility and it's tedious and they don't like it, because through that work they're able to afford leisure, and that's kind of this balancing it out. So it's quite interesting that this shift kind of happened, and I think over the last couple of years we've seen the kind of slowly an interest in getting back to that and like making it a substantial part of life. So obviously, the reasons why we had economic growth were still very positive in a way. So we were able to centralize things like power and authority, or compensation, signal sensing, quality control. Like that was the only way that the economy could reach that stage. But now we're kind of getting to decentralization. And I want to kind of also be very careful about the term decentralization, because I don't think that's a panacea for all the problems. Decentralization is like actually a process of decentralizing these very specific aspects of work, using novel tools and norms that are accessible to us now as we kind of leave the centralized era and have Web3 tools. So there's this kind of two, and I'm going to kind of walk through that now. So there's these two, I would say, extremes on either side. So on one hand, you currently have traditional organizations which have a business model, and they protect that business model by writing up job posts, job descriptions, and making it as promising as possible to find the perfect candidate. And you have applicants who write their CVs and try to apply, try to kind of create the best image of themselves. But we know that that's not a game that works out well, because both just continuously get better at lying to each other. There's rarely really a focus on the substantial relationship between employees and workers. People kind of feel that, I think. Whereas on the other extreme, we have online communities, which are like Reddit or forums, which are based on this model of discovery of content. So people are just interested in what they really are passionate about, and then they join these communities, start communicating, start exchanging knowledge, learn, and also accumulate these portable profiles that now also show what they are knowledgeable about and what they're interested in. I think what we're looking at now is like kind of the combination of both, where we're able to see or create this flexibility of independent individuals in what they want to work on, and combine that with financial and emotional stability that we would normally get from a job. And I think, and I call this like discovery of work model, because people would discover what they really want to work on. We just need to frame that. And I think we need three things to get there, which is we need to be able to get people to join an organization at any point in time, at any skill level. We need to be fully transparent about what the work consists of and the financial compensation. And we need to have portable profiles and portable reputation data that people can actually own themselves. But before we get there, I think we need to actually redefine what work really means. So Henry Ford invented the 8-hour workday, which I think a lot of people here in the room, but also just generally a lot of kind of privileged people were able to exit from and try to create new models. And we know that that's not sustainable. The alternative was basically hour tracking, so kind of quantifying how much time you would spend on work. But that's also not really ideal, because if you really love the work that you do, then you don't want to track hours. And if you don't love the work you do, then you count more hours than would in reality represent the work that you did. And so DeepWork started as an organization DeepWork is a design studio, and we started as a purely project-based organization. So we would actually take something that would normally be seen as a service, like a design service, and we would be very, very specific about what we do. So we wouldn't, like in a traditional design studio, you would go to them and you'd be like, I need like all of these things. And the design studio would go, yeah, cool, like we have the people, we just do it. And then it takes an indefinite amount of time, and you spend money, and you have feedback loops, and then you end up wherever. We ran these design sprints, which are exactly like 7 days long. We could actually say, it starts here, it ends here. This is the amount of days, this is the amount of hours that it takes, the amount of hours it takes you, the amount of hours it takes us, and this is the exact deliverable. And that was not good for like everybody, but it was very specific to a niche audience and a very specific deliverable. And so now our entire organization is set up like that, where regardless of whether it's an external project or an internal project, and this is what's actually applicable to any organization, you just scope out what a project would consist of. So you'd look at like what's the work, what's the recurring work, what are the things that people take responsibility of on a recurring basis. You would start at one point, you would end at another point, you would say like this is the exact deliverable, and it could also be like 2 weeks or like 1 month of work or something. It's still a project because you specify exactly what goes into that project and what's the hours spent on it. So then you technically you want to take this further and like projectize your work. You just look at like, okay, what are the hours that are spent? You compare these hours to a market rate, and then you have the value and the cost of that project. And then you can go to either a client or a stakeholder and be like, is that actually the work that you would pay for? Is that a deliverable that you would pay this specific price? And that way you can figure out if your work is valuable. And so in practice, the shorter the negotiation, the closer you are at the correct like market estimation of the value of the work. The longer it is, the more there's a chance that you need to either like scope down or extend it a little bit. Different conversation, but that's the idea. And essentially, like this projectizing helps you to basically create a meritocratic compensation, because now you just have this deliverable and you know exactly the value of the work that the market is willing to pay. And it also solves another couple of problems, or like it actually helps having more frequent feedback loops. So rather than having feedback loops after half a year, here you have every 2 weeks. You can have a chance to improve internally, you can improve the projects, you can improve the people. And you offer new people the ability to actually be introduced in the organization in a lot more frequent basis, just at the start of every project. At DeepWork, we first hired people in a full-time position, and then ended up realizing that the market fluctuates too much because we were focused on Web3. And it was like, okay, we don't have any work now for 3 months, but we still have this guy. And it was not good for anyone. So by projectizing, we were basically able to say, okay, look, you know it's projects, we know it's projects. If there's no work, you just find work somewhere else because you're a freelancer. And we are able to sustain our business model. Now over time, it becomes more and more predictable how much work we would get. And so, but actually, let's actually look at the actual onboarding and introduction into the work, because I think that's also kind of the recruitment of people. Because you can take these projects and roles and go even deeper and describe it in a lot more granular detail. So you could go into like, this project consists of these specific roles and these individual tasks. So that, and in Deep Work, we actually created like a documentation on Gitbook where we would have very, very specific description of what the work requires. And that's not just like to set the quality standard for the entire organization, because like good organizations also do that. But now that also acts as an attractor for new people to actually just discover the work that they would love on one side. And on our internal side, we also look at like, this is the quality standard. This is, you know, it becomes more and more, like, it becomes less about the kind of deceiving each other and trying to get the best deal or the best candidate. And it becomes more and more about like, is that actually the relationship that I want from this on either side? And progressive organizations also use this kind of documentation to establish a mentor and mentee relationship. So, you know, as someone would come in, obviously like people mostly need some kind of training before they start working. And in our case, you can create this like this relationship between a mentor and a student that's really tight, because with the project-based work, the cost of firing someone is zero, and everybody knows that. So guess what people do? They strengthen the social network. The students make better predictions about what they really can deliver on, and get better at being like self-driven in their learning, and the mentors get better at their own skills because they get to teach them at a regular basis. They learn recruitment, so an actual kind of social skill. They learn communicating properly. They learn mentorship. They learn all these like things that in soft skills that we considered as an external thing in normal organizations, and now it's becoming like this, like the systemic property of this like organizational infrastructure. So it's like benefiting everybody to create this like very honest social network. And with Web3 tools, we also have the possibility to take that even further, because now because we have these kind of tokens and co-ownership of organizations, we can essentially give people the ability to also make long-term predictions. So they would obviously get better at finding new candidates that fit the organization, because they might know someone in their immediate social network who is like, can be introduced because they know that they will be better for the entire organization because that's valuable for them. We also have this concept of a recruitment bonus. So as mentors and students split up the work, like, you know, you have your role and you split it up, the project budget can be split up in relationship to the actual like task splits. So now you can kind of fragmentize the work while keeping it still meritocratic, which is also kind of cool. And then if you have extremely high market demand for the actual work, you would increase your prices. So the prices of your service would automatically increase, or like you would manually increase them in order to keep up with that pressure. But that profit can automatically go to the people who are recruiting, so that you incentivize those to actually scale the organization at the same time as it's needed on the open market. And so this whole idea of these kind of composable roles offers a lot of opportunity to like play with that data, because it's public, or like public kind of for the first time in history. We can make that public without actually destroying an organization, because setting up the infrastructure for an organization is now free. It's just data. It's like, that's the documentation. You can read it. You can copy paste the design studio. If any one of you wants to create a new design studio, go for it. Copy paste everything, and then the result of that is that you're just like saturating the market, or like you're actually extending the market, because you wouldn't be able to copy exactly the same market. You wouldn't be able to steal that market of one organization, because again, the infrastructure is free compared to previous organizations. But you would actually just like a lot faster be able to expand in your own market and actually kind of saturate a completely new vertical. And you can kind of compose these roles into whatever you want. Like we have roles of very, very different skills, like user research, but also front end. Like it really doesn't matter. Like take any kind of role in every job. You can like componentize that. You can build like your hierarchies, your dominance hierarchies. With Web3 tools, again, you can assign them specific roles and specific governance votes. So governance weights, so that every role has a specific kind of influence on the organization. You can have, what do you call it, like conditional requirements for people to just kind of go along these like trees and expand. And it generally just creates this environment where you have an anti-fragile organization by having always a mentor-mentee relationship, always being as close to the market as possible as you need to scale. You can also kind of take a role and then programmatically extend it if that's actually needed. So if the market demands something more from one particular role and needs adjustment, then you just like, you create that and then you update that across all the people who own that role. And then you could also have the possibility for retroactive compensation, because now you have roles that are very specific in terms of their value. You know what their value is to a specific organization. You can, like, 2 people or 3 people come together, create a new project, you scope it out, like I explained earlier, and then you know the exact cost. So if that cost is actually reasonable to an organization, you show the value, you can be like, okay, cool, I'll pay you exactly that cost because it's been quantified. And so that ownership of these roles leads to the last part that I want to kind of touch on, which is the portable reputation. That's been so far in traditional organizations locked in because of competitive reasons. So it gives the organizations a competitive advantage, keeping them secret, as well as it keeps the privacy of people safe. It preserves people's privacy with the data about their work. We know that the alternative is like LinkedIn or personal portfolios, but even there, it's also like semi-ideal because people usually write about themselves, and again, they optimize for the best. But I think the actual kind of the roles that someone has in an organization, that is also, like, especially if they're transparent, that is actually then a skill. But it's also verified because you worked at that organization. You know the value of the organization. You know the value of the project. It has a brand. You worked there, so that's your skill now. As you've worked on, you collected that, and you found, like, you attach that to your personal profiles, which will make possible with like Web3 wallets and integrations and all the cool Web3 tech that we're working on. And so the biggest challenges now become, like, how do we actually gather all that reputation data that is around, and how do we kind of how do we make that accessible to organizations? Like these things already exist. Like reputation data is already being gathered. There are really cool reputation tools around, and we also have these thanks. We have organizations getting basically finding that data. But I think what's really important to keep in mind here is that we're also the individuals who have to own that data, and that's also something that we can only do now with the Web3 technology, is that we can actually like aggregate that data, but also and make sure that it's visible, that it's transparent, but at the same time also give people the possibility to decide who they want to show it to, because it's theirs, and they have to govern about it. So, and that whole thing opens up like a huge potential for completely new markets, where you can have like the discovery of skills, you have curation of roles and skills, you can create prediction, or like you will be able to create we're not there yet. We will be able to create prediction markets. So, like imagine having a skill that is on your profile, and then you have an application that shows you, hey, maybe you look into this thing because that's on your trajectory, on your perfect trajectory of development, or like compensation or whatever. So I think as we kind of seen from this kind of very rigid financial stability and emotional stability of traditional organizations, as that's kind of falling apart and leads humanity to stagnation, I think this transparency over work, the portable profiles, projectizing it, and the feedback loops, they create this environment where every individual develops the growth mindset by nature, as a systemic property of the whole environment, this whole organizational infrastructure, and also makes the whole organization a lot more resilient. So we have the ability now to kind of have this individual, like the freedom of the individual and the independent individual to find work, like, I guess, once that structure is more prominent across more organizations, once that's more saturated or like once more accessible, individuals can actually be free in what they choose and what they discover, and at the same time like develop this financial stability through the growth mindset, or like through the ability to actually find the work that's also being compensated at the value of the work that they do. So it's pretty exciting to me to think about it, because we're kind of not looking for organizations anymore that are just purely driven by growth or like being faster than anyone else, but we can actually focus on the singularity of solving a particular problem on a global scale. And what I find particularly nice is that we are almost like these designers now of the organizations that we build at the same time as we are the participants of these decentralized organizations. That's me, thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's one very particular question that I'd like to ask you, and it's, is it possible to replicate for software development the deep work model that you've developed for design? How applicable do you think it is to software development?
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, we also kind of do that, or I would say it kind of emerges as a consequence of it, because again, I think about software development not as like this whole thing of like you're doing everything, but like focus in on this one particular like problem that we would solve. So like, for example, as a front-end developer, you're just like, of course you could take all the libraries into consideration, but like, you know, focus in on like either a subset, or like focus in on what you can like predict how long it will take you and projectize that. That's the value of what you can do.